The 80s buried some genuinely interesting films under the blockbusters, overshadowed by their own soundtracks, studio interference, or just terrible timing. These aren't hidden gems waiting to be discovered. They had their moment and then disappeared. In Lost in America, Albert Brooks plays David Howard, a Los Angeles ad executive who quits his job after being passed over for promotion, convincing his wife Linda to sell everything and live on their nest egg in a Winnebago like the characters in Easy Rider. Turns out the plan falls apart instantly in Las Vegas when Linda loses nearly all their savings at roulette, forcing them into humiliating entry-level jobs in small-town Arizona. Brooks treats the American dream as an expensive illusion that only works if you never actually try to live it, with the nest egg speech becoming cultural shorthand for 80s middle-class terror. Brooks refused to use sound stages, filming inside a real Winnebago across the desert and letting genuine discomfort fuel the character's crumbling marriage. The scene where David tries to convince a casino manager to return their lost money, with Gary Marshall playing it completely deadpan and soul-crushing, became a masterclass in status comedy. Desperation fails completely against absolute power. Produced for $4 million, it took 10 weeks of word of mouth to expand from 10 theaters to 300, eventually grossing $10.1 million. The film became a cautionary tale that privileged people still reference when their own plans fall apart. At Close Range features Sean Penn as Brad Whitewood Jr., a bored rural Pennsylvania teenager whose estranged father Brad Sr. suddenly reappears as a charismatic gang leader, stealing farm equipment. Desperate for a father figure and a way out of his dead-end town, Brad Jr. joins the family business with his half-brother, forming their own crew. The horror starts when they witness the extreme violence their father uses to protect his criminal empire. And when the FBI closes in, Brad Sr. decides his sons are liabilities who need to be executed. Christopher Walken plays the father with such terrifying unpredictability that Penn's fear on camera became genuinely unscripted during the climactic gun scene. The film bombed hard, grossing only $2.3 million against a $6.5 million budget, and forcing Orion Pictures to abandon dark director-driven projects. Weirdly enough, the only cultural footprint came from Madonna's Live to Tell, which she wrote specifically for Penn's character after hearing a rejected instrumental track. The song hit #1 while the film disappeared, creating the strange legacy of a pop ballad, outliving a brutal neo-noir about rural patricide. Dead Calm puts Nicole Kidman and Sam Neill on a yacht as a grieving couple sailing the Pacific when they encounter Hughie Warner, who claims his crew died of food poisoning. While John investigates the sinking ship, Hughie hijacks the yacht with Ray aboard, leaving John stranded on a rotting wreck. The revolutionary part is how 20-year-old Kidman fights back instead of waiting for rescue, using her head and her fists to survive, creating the blueprint for survivalist heroines in modern nautical horror. The original ending was a quiet psychological resolution, but Warner Bros. Forced director Philip Noyce to add a brutal flare gun jump scare months after filming, which meant fans felt it belonged in a different movie. With only 3 actors and 2 boats isolated at sea for 6 months, the production created genuine vertigo that bled into performances. You don't need massive budgets to create real tension, just 3 people and open water. The film caught Tom Cruise's attention and led to Days of Thunder, but Kidman's solo performance here announced she could carry a thriller without anyone's help. Against All Odds opens in 1984, when millions of people walked into movie theaters with a specific melody ringing in their ears, a soaring, heartbreaking power ballad by Phil Collins. They expected a high-status romance, a story where love conquers all against all odds. Instead, they were the victims of a genius marketing scam. Jeff Bridges plays Terry Brogan, a washed-up football player who gets sucked into tracking down his sleazy friend's runaway girlfriend in Mexico, only to fall for her himself and discover he's a pawn in a real estate murder scheme. This is a remake of the 1947 noir, Out of the Past, and the boldest move was casting Jane Greer, the original femme fatale, as the mother of the new one, essentially watching herself be replaced in real time. The genius here is using sun-drenched Cozumel beaches to subvert classic noir aesthetics, replacing shadowy alleys with blinding tropical light that can't hide the corruption underneath. The Phil Collins song wasn't just a hit, it was a psychological weapon. The studio used the romantic music video to sell audiences on an escape fantasy, but the film delivers a pitch-black ending where the woman chooses her inheritance over love. The final 4 minutes lock on Rachel Ward's face in brutal silence as the song plays, watching her realize she just sold her soul for a gilded cage. Deathtrap casts Michael Caine as a failed playwright who receives a brilliant script from a former student and jokes about murdering him to steal it, leading to betrayals where the play within mirrors real violence. What shocked audiences was the kiss between Caine and Christopher Reeve, 2 alpha male stars in a moment that recontextualized everything viewers had seen. The The studio was terrified it would destroy both careers, but both stood by the choice as essential to the film's deceptive nature, with the kiss functioning as narrative bomb rather than shock value. The film is a play about a play called Deathtrap, being written inside the movie Deathtrap, a metafiction structure innovated for the early 80s that defined home invasion noir. Director Sidney Lumet wanted a poisonous Valentine to the theater, treating the story as cynical commentary on writers willing to kill for a good ending. For Kane, this represented his transition from young scoundrel to sophisticated intellectual, establishing him as the thinking person's action star and cementing his reputation as the actor's actor of the 80s. Electric Dreams begins when Miles Harding accidentally spills champagne on his new computer during an electrical storm, giving the machine sentience and a personality it names Edgar. When Miles falls for his zealous neighbor Madeline, Edgar falls for her too through her music, which meant the film turned into a love triangle where a jealous computer sabotages its owner's life. Weirdly enough, audiences ended up sympathizing with the computer more than the human lead, seeing Edgar as lonely and tragic instead of funny. The duel between Madeline's cello and Edgar's synth composition treats technology as just another instrument that can express real emotion, creating the visual language for synthwave aesthetics before the genre had a name. Long before Alexa or smart homes, the film predicted the horror of a sentient house that locks you out and hijacks your bank accounts, playing as light comedy in 1984, but reading as accidental prophecy now. Director Steve Barron built the production around a $7 million budget from Virgin Pictures, specifically because Boy George and Culture Club agreed to supply the music. The film bombed with only $2.1 million domestically, but the soundtrack kept selling for decades after everyone forgot the movie existed. Looker has Albert Finney as Dr. Larry Roberts, a plastic surgeon whose models begin dying after he performs microscopic adjustments. Only computers could detect, leading him to Digital Matrix Inc. and their Looker gun that blinds victims with light pulses. This features the first three-dimensional computer-generated human model in cinema, years before Tron, created by scanning a real actress. The prophetic part is how the writer-director turned beauty into a weapon, hiring plastic surgeons to design flaws so small only computers could see them, attacking how advertising was literally reshaping humans to sell products. The Looker gun functions as a metaphor for the movie camera, using light to blind us to reality and make us passive consumers. The central warning about corporations replacing real people with perfect digital assets sounded like paranoid science fiction in 1981, but now reads as documentary. Surprisingly, James Coburn later claimed the studio butchered the film to secure a PG rating, cutting so much that his character barely made sense, and the message about television mind control got sacrificed for action. Despite the $12 million budget and cutting-edge technology, audiences found the rules too convoluted, and the film vanished from theaters within weeks. Innerspace follows Dennis Quaid as Tuck Pendleton, a naval pilot who volunteers to be shrunk to molecular size for a secret experiment, only to get accidentally injected into the backside of Jack Putter, a neurotic grocery clerk played by Martin Short. Director Joe Dante turned the serious premise of Fantastic Voyage into screwball comedy by treating the human body like a weird organic spaceship, filled with stomach acid and biological nightmares. The secret weapon is Martin Short's performance, reacting to voices in his head while his limbs look controlled by external forces, creating a physical comedy masterclass that defined the nervous hero archetype for decades. Turns out, the original script was a dark thriller about corporate espionage, until Steven Spielberg insisted on making it a comedy with heart, shifting the meaning from spy story to a tale about two lonely men finding connection through the most absurd circumstances possible. The film's Oscar-winning visual effects let sci-fi embrace messy cartoon logic instead of cold clinical realism, making the genre feel alive and weird. Despite Spielberg's protection and a $27 million budget, it only grossed $42 million worldwide and got labeled a disappointment, though it remains the only Dante film to ever win an Academy Award. Somewhere in Time centers on Christopher Reeve as Richard Collier, a playwright who discovers a photograph of a beautiful actress from 1912, becomes obsessed, and uses self-hypnosis to project himself back in time. The film's unique legacy comes from being a commercial failure saved by Eye in Sight, fans who gather annually at the Grand Hotel in period costume to celebrate the film's pure romanticism, single-handedly keeping the hotel in business during lean years. For Reeve, this was his attempt to escape Superman's shadow by taking a massive pay cut to establish himself as a serious romantic lead. The ending, where a modern Penny accidentally pulls Richard back, is considered one of the cruelest moments in romance cinema, with the director fighting the studio to keep it tragic rather than happy. The Penny represents cold reality intruding on a perfect dream, making Somewhere in Time shorthand for impossible love. Later films like Titanic and The Notebook borrowed the elderly narrator, remembering lost romance structure to maximize emotional devastation, but this film invented the template. The mission shows Father Gabriel climbing the Iguazu Falls to build a Jesuit mission, eventually joined by Rodrigo Mendoza, a former slave trader seeking penance for murdering his brother. When the church orders abandonment to satisfy political treaties, Gabriel chooses nonviolent resistance, while Mendoza returns to violence to defend indigenous people. The film forces audiences to pick a side between pure pacifism and fighting back. Do you die with prayer or die with a sword? And there's no right answer. The director designed the ending to be intentionally unsatisfying, using it as a teaching tool in seminaries to debate when violence becomes justified. Robert De Niro's portrayal, dragging armor up the mountain, became the blueprint for anti-hero redemption arcs. The score, particularly Gabriel's oboe, represents the bridge where music transcends language to prevent violence, blending liturgical work with indigenous percussion. The composer's failure to win the Academy Award sparked such outcry that he eventually received an honorary Oscar. The final shot holds on the cardinal looking directly into the camera, a silent accusation against institutional churches that chose political expediency over human life.